Welcome to Legal Video Resource. I'm Jason Wheatholter. Today we're talking about lighting for deposition video. Lights for deposition video. It's not something that you're going to need very often, but the need could come up. Now, lighting for deposition video is a lot different than lighting for any other video you might do. For example, in this studio, I've got a 3-point light kit set up and a couple of other lights set up to kind of give it some space. So I've got my key light, my fill light, I've got my hair light, and kind of a background light. That's a 3-point light setup. Now, you're probably not going to have time as a deposition videographer to be able to set up 3-point lighting like this to make a deponent or a room, a witness, or the room look this good. You don't have the time, and it's not your job either. And the reason it's not your job to set up a light kit like this and make it look Hollywood style is because you don't want to introduce any bias. And arguably, this kind of a lighting setup could introduce bias. It doesn't necessarily introduce bias, but it could. And that's not your job to introduce bias. You don't really have time to set it up, and a lot of times you don't have the space to set it up the way you want to, or the way you would want to as a videographer in a deposition room. So that leads us to, if not a 3-point light setup like you normally see in interviews and videos, what kind of a lighting setup? If you don't have time, if you don't have space, and you don't really want to introduce bias, what do? Well, you use a single light. Because what that will do, the way to use a single light is to use a single light that's bright enough to just brighten the whole room up. You don't want to point it right at the deponent or point it right at the witness and kind of, blind them with a light. You just want to light the whole room up. Also, pointing it directly at the witness, it's not really flattering and it's really distracting to them. So you don't want to do that, but you do want to use a light, typically a single light, and just bounce it off of a ceiling or a wall, something that's relatively white in nature, and just brighten up the whole room. So what does that mean for deposition video in terms of what light you should get? Well, nowadays, LED lights like this one, LED lights are really inexpensive, really lightweight, and really easy to use. So this is an LED light. You would just pop this on, point it at the ceiling, point it at a wall, turn it on full blast, or dial it down a little bit if you want to, and you've got light for your deposition without setting up stands and everything else. You've got a really nice light. There are a couple of features or functions of LED lights that you need to be aware of for deposition video. The first are these barn doors. With LED lights, they're really not as, they don't do as good of a job shaping the light as typical incandescent Fresnel lights. There are some LED lights with Fresnel lenses on them that these barn doors are actually really useful for shaping the light, maybe pinpointing it or doing something with it. For deposition video, you're not really worried about shaping the light as much as you are just blocking it from blinding somebody else. So if you had a light, say you watching me are the witness, and you have a light pointed at you, well, this light is going to just be blinding you the whole time. But if I point this light up, that's great. Now it's not pointed directly at you, but now you can still see these LEDs. And so these LEDs are still going to be really bright when you're looking down at the camera. So these barn doors are actually really good just for blocking them from the person viewing them. And, this one might reflect too much, so you can move it around if you need to. These you can open back up if you want to. But the whole idea behind barn doors is typically to shape the light on what it is that you're pointing the light at. But for deposition video, you can also use them as a way to kind of block light from being in somebody's face or in somebody's eyes. The other thing that's really important about LEDs for deposition video, you're going to be in a lot of different situations, in rooms that have incandescent lights, in rooms that have fluorescent lights, in rooms that have windows. And each of these different types of light have different color temperatures. Some more red or orange than others, some more blue or green than others. For example, most incandescent light, if you just turn on an incandescent light bulb, it puts out this kind of orange hue. Now, if you're standing in a room where you have an incandescent light bulb, maybe it's in a lamp, and you also have a window, put a piece of paper down in the middle of that room and just sit there for a minute. Look at the light, or look at the color of that white piece of paper under the lamp, and then move it over to in front of the window and look at it under the window. Now, after you've gotten used to looking at it under the window, move it back over under the lamp. Under the lamp, it's going to be much more red or orange. Under the window light, the outside light, it's going to be much more blue. That's because those different lights have different color temperatures. Fluorescent lights kind of land somewhere in between, but they also have a little bit of this green tinge to them. Modern LED lights allow you to have multiple different colors of LED, so you can actually change the color temperature to match whatever room you're in. So that's really important for deposition video, because you might be in a room where it's mostly fluorescent light, or maybe it's all incandescent light, or maybe it's mostly fluorescent light with some windows kind of bouncing light around in the back that you can't control. That light's all going to mix together and the colors are going to change. This is why on your camera, manually white balancing for whatever light is in the room is so important. But you can also kind of adjust your light to whatever the strongest light or primary light is in the room. So modern LEDs, look for LEDs that you can change the color temperature of. You don't want just daylight balanced. You don't want just indoor balanced. You want lights that you can change the color temperature of. Also, having a light with a diffuser on the front of it is a nice feature because it softens the light. So this is a diffuser panel, and as you can see, it's just kind of this semi-transparent panel that blurs things out. So as I put this in front of my face, you can't see me very clearly. I can move it back and forth. Now I just have exposed LEDs down here, which these are great because they're nice and bright, but they're really, really strong and really, really, really pinpointed. But if I put this diffuser back in, it doesn't totally diffuse all that light that you're going to see and make it really nice and soft, but it helps to soften it up a lot. And this is really helpful for deposition video, again, because you're just kind of pointing it at a ceiling. You're going to be pointing at a ceiling or a wall. That ceiling or that wall is going to be basically a giant bounce board, and it's going to diffuse the light for you. So you might not even need this diffuser, but the diffuser is nice because it can give you really, really soft light. The next feature of LED lights that isn't really something that's in the light itself in terms of control or power is this mounting mechanism. So there are different mounting mechanisms that you can get for lights. Most of them just have like a 1/4-20 hole, like this does in the very bottom, a little 1/4-20 hole, and you just screw this onto a light stand, or if you have some arm that has a 1/4-20 mount on it, you can just screw that onto the light and then kind of put it wherever you want. This one, and you can get adapters that do this, but this one also has a cold shoe mount. And so what this allows me to do is just slide this directly into the top, that cold shoe on a camera, and now it's sitting on top of the camera, mounted in the camera just like this. So now I've got a light that's, I don't have to have an extra light stand for, I don't have to have any other rigging gear for, it just sits on the camera. I can just point the light up at the top of the ceiling. You know, for example, I just loosen this thing up, point it up, and so now if I were to mount this thing, it'd be pointed basically directly at the ceiling, and even though it'd be mounted to the camera flat like this. So that's another great feature. The last thing that you need to kind of worry about, and probably the most important thing, are how many LEDs, or how strong is this light? How much light is it going to put off? Because when you're not pointing the light directly at somebody, when you're not pointing a light or setting up a light in a 3-point lighting setup like this, that light, as it bounces off of things, quickly diminishes in terms of its power. Now, that's not a huge or a deal breaker for deposition video because, again, most of the time you're going to be in a room where you're just trying to add a little bit of light. You're trying to brighten it up a little bit. This isn't the only source of light in the room. So, you know, in my case with the 3-point light setup, I've got a light that's basically just out of arm's reach right here. I've got another light that's right here just out of arm's reach, and then one that's just over my head back here. Those 3 lights are the only 3 lights that are really providing any light on me. So they're all really bright, really strong lights, much brighter than this light is. But if I were to use this light in a room like this, I wouldn't really need to do anything else to, replace one of these lights. I just need to bounce this off of a ceiling or off of a wall, and then I've got a little bit of extra light in the room. And that's all I really need it for. So deposition lights, stronger, probably better, because you can almost always dim them down. And dimming is another really important feature that kind of goes with the brightness, in that you need to be able to control how bright that light is. It doesn't just need to turn on and be on 100%. You need to be able to turn it down a little bit or dim it down some, so that way it's not 100% bright all the time. And you can kind of match the room better that way. So if you need to brighten up the room just a little bit, you can turn the light on and maybe dim it down to about 10% or 25% brightness, or maybe 50% brightness. Or if you're in a room where you need a lot of light, you just turn it all the way up to 100% brightness, and you've got that kind of flexibility with LED lights. So that's lighting for deposition video. You don't always need it, but when you do, you really need it. It could come up, so have a light or a light kit that's on call that you can take with you to a deposition. LED lights nowadays are a great choice because they're lightweight, they're inexpensive, they're easy to use, they're easy to mount to a camera, and they're pretty stinking bright and flexible for deposition video. So again, deposition video, lighting for deposition video, not something that's needed all the time, and probably most of the time it's not necessarily needed, but when you do need it, you need it. So have it around. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you found this video interesting or helpful, I encourage you, click subscribe down below, because as we post new content to this channel, you'll be the first to know about it. Also, if you have a question or a comment, maybe something you want to know more details about, let us know in the comments. We'll try to answer those there or in a future video. Again, thanks so much for joining us, and we will see you next time on Legal Video Resource.